Why don't we get an update from Nigeria now? My colleague Kayla Megwa is a presenter and State House correspondent for Channels Television in Abuja. She joins me via Skype. Kayla, it's good to see you once again. Hope you're keeping healthy. What's the latest in Nigeria?
Hi, it's nice to talk with you again. Well, the latest in Nigeria is that the number is increasing, which is a very sad situation for us. The nation's capital has 8 cases right now. The last time we spoke to you, we had about 3 cases. There are 8 cases now in the nation's capital, and then nationwide we have 46 cases of COVID-19, and that is a big source of worry for everyone in the country right now. Another interesting update we've had since the last time we spoke is that we have quite a number of government officials who are down with this disease. The governor of Bauchi State, at the time we spoke, he was in self-isolation and they were testing to see if he had it because he had been in contact with the son of a former vice president and PDP presidential candidate, Mr. Atiku Abubakar. Well, since we spoke, he has tested positive to the disease. We also have the chief of staff to President Muhammadu Buhari. His name is Mr. Abba Kyari, also testing positive to COVID-19. The a deputy official somewhere in Edo State has also tested positive to COVID-19. So we're seeing a lot of that going on in the country at the moment, and that is, help making many states tighten their belts. Like the nation's capital, for instance, has commenced a partial lockdown starting from today. So we went to a few markets today, found out that many shops have been asked to close. The Wuse market, for instance, in the nation's capital, which is one of the biggest markets in Abuja, has been asked to, they've been asking a lot of people who do not provide essential services to close their shops for the next 2 weeks. But we still have people who provide, who sell things like food, still open in many markets across the nation's capital. And compliance levels are beginning to rise here in Abuja. Many people are beginning to comply with the stay-at-home order. There was also an order for civil servants from grade level 12 and below to not come to work. That's the way of that the civil service is thinking they can flatten the curve of the spread of this disease. So grade level 12 and below asked not to come to work, so they haven't been coming to work for maybe the past few days, and that has reduced the traffic. We're still seeing a lot of people crowding themselves in buses, which is a big problem. But there's a lot that is being done on the part of government to see how people can comply more with this stay-at-home order. Remember, this is, like I said the last time, this is a new thing for, especially here in Nigeria, where we're used to mingling quite a bit. So the idea of staying at home, not coming out, trying to isolate yourself and make sure that you're healthy is something that many people are still trying to adjust to, but it's a necessity, and people are beginning to understand that right here in Nigeria.
Right now, this increase in cases involving members of government, what is the prevailing theory here? Do they suspect a single point of contact?
So that's also very interesting conversation that has been going on. No, it is not a single point of contact. Like I said, the Bauchi State governor, for instance, may have contacted it from the interaction he had with the son of Mr. Atiku Abubakar, who was a former vice president under the when Mr. Obasanjo was our president. Mr. Atiku was the vice president at the time, but he is the PDP candidate in the last election competing against President Muhammadu Buhari. So his interaction with Mr. Atiku's son may have been what made him get that particular to get COVID-19. But that's not the case. For instance, three members of staff of the chief of staff have contacted COVID-19, and the chief of staff himself has contacted the disease, Mr. Abba Kyari. And there's no word on how that contact happened. There is no actual link between both people. So it wouldn't be right to say that it's from a single point of contact. However, a lot of government officials do travel around the world and have to engage in many of these activities, and that could be where some of the infection is coming from. But like I said the last time, a big problem, Salah Mohammed talked about this, people who come back to Nigeria from other countries, not just countries that are affected, But people who come back to Nigeria have to self-isolate, and many people are not self-isolating. Many people are not self-isolating, and that is a big problem that they're having to grapple with. Salam Mohammed was talking about how they're looking for over 1,000 contacts who were in contact with some of the people who have tested positive for the disease. Now, it will be natural. The right thing to do is that if you've been in contact with someone who you know has tested positive to the disease, you should self-isolate. And if you develop any symptoms, call the NCDC. Let them know, I have been in contact with such and such a person. Do I need to be tested? A lot of people are not doing that, but I do have to say that a lot of people are doing that as well. In fact, we're seeing people say, look, I just got back into the country and I am self-isolating, pray for me. All right. We also have people who are saying, I was in contact with such and such a person. For instance, it's in the news, the Africa Magic Viewers' Choice Awards, the AMVC, and I think some people from Ghana may have been at that particular event. Well, the update on the AMVCA is that the NCDC in Nigeria is asking everybody who attended the AMVCA in Lagos, Nigeria, to self-isolate or go get themselves tested because somebody at that event has tested positive to COVID-19. So that's something that anyone who was at that event, for instance, and I know a lot of Ghanaians may have been there with Nigerians, to celebrate the African Magic Viewer Choice Award, and they've all been asked to go self-isolate, get tested to ensure that they don't have this disease and spread it to people who they just come in contact with. So that's going on right now.
Now, Nigeria's President Buhari is 77 years old. He would fall into the category of those who are quite sensitive and susceptible to the worst of COVID-19. What's the strategy there to protect him? Has he been tested? Is he in isolation? What's his situation?
All right. So, following the report that the Chief of Staff, Mr. Abakari, has tested positive to COVID-19. Naturally, most of the people who are always around him, the president and the vice president, actually. So President Muhammadu Buhari and, of course, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo. But the first thing that happened after the results came out was that Mr. Vice President went into isolation, first of all, and he had his test done today. The Vice President had his test done today, and the test for COVID-19 came out that the Vice President is negative for the disease. Mr. President just got tested right now, and the results are in. We're seeing a message from his head of media, who's saying basically that Mr. President is negative for COVID-19. So President Muhammadu Buhari and Vice President Yemi Osinbajo both testing negative for COVID-19. That's the update from the presidential villa.
That's useful to know. Thank you for that. Now let's look at the population in general. How would you estimate the level of awareness of COVID-19? Is every Nigerian completely clued up on it? Do they all know what to do, no matter their level of education or their location across the map?
Yes. I can't speak for every Nigerian, but what I can tell you is the amount of work that has been done by the NCDC, the Center for Disease Control right here in Nigeria. There are jingles on every TV station. There are jingles on every radio station. There are sensitization programs going on all over the place. There's a lot of conversations around this disease because a lot of us are still trying to understand it. So the NCDC in Nigeria has been having lots of awareness programs. It's all over. You can barely turn on the television without seeing some form of awareness program on COVID-19 going on. So that is one of the situations that we have right now in the country. We cannot speak for everyone being totally sensitized on what the problem is, but we can speak right now saying that a lot of work has been done to ensure that many people are educated on this situation. Sorry about the noise in the background. We are in the
That's all right. We can hear you quite clearly, Kayla. Don't worry about it at all. Our newsroom is probably even louder. But let me ask you this: do you still get crowds gathering, people coming together to organize events and so forth? And is there often a need to disperse crowds? Is that a problem that Nigeria is facing?
So it's not exactly a problem right now in the nation's capital. of course, the gatherings of people have been discouraged for a long time. Since the disease came out. Officially in the nation's capital, you can't have a gathering of over 50 people. And where we see those kind of gatherings are mostly at churches and mosques and, and places like that. But we don't have those sort of situations going on, right? At least of today. We went around the nation's capital today and didn't have to experience that. However, we're still grappling with, transporters. That is a big problem. The buses, people are still moving around. The stay-at-home order, many people are still not obeying the stay-at-home order. So we have a situation where people are in buses, still moving around, and the buses are crammed. We saw some taxis today that had too many people inside of them. Social distancing cannot be adhered to if these rules are not being followed, especially by the people. Now, another problem is people that do not provide essential services constantly being outside. That is a big problem here in the nation's capital, at least because the FCT minister has ordered people who do not provide essential services to stay at home. But a lot of people are not doing that. I spoke to a few people that I saw on the street. I saw someone who was going to visit a friend, and she was entering a taxi to go visit someone. And I was trying to ask her if she knew the kind of danger she was putting herself in. We also have someone who went to work, and I tried to find out, what job do you do? And he said it was a furniture owner, a furniture company owner. And I said, why are you going to work? You're not providing an essential service. Why are you going to work at a time like this? I think people will catch on. I think that's my feeling. People will catch on, but it will take some time. But hopefully, we don't have to pay for this defiance on the part of many people.
Now, there are some jobs that simply cannot be done from home. Your job is an example of that. So how are you and your colleagues protecting yourselves? Are there any clear and present dangers to the execution of the journalist's job in Nigeria today?
It's even a little bit more complicated being in the State House. Remember that I am a State House correspondent.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what the State House has done. So the press corps at every State House, and I'm sure the same thing applies in Ghana, is usually filled with a lot of journalists, right? You probably have a lot of journalists who want to cover the president, who are assigned to cover the president or the vice president. However, this particular press corps in Nigeria has decided to cut down the number of journalists. So there was a malicious story going online saying that some media houses were banned. It wasn't a ban. The idea was to cut down the number of people. We're talking on upwards of 80 journalists at the press corps at the presidential villa at every point in time. So it was important for them to reduce that number so that we can, still cover the president. We have to share, Channels Television is one of the people who were one of the stations that are allowed to be in the villa at this particular point in time. But we are under obligation to share whatever information we get from the villa with our colleagues who are outside of the presidential villa at this time. So yes, for the villa, for the National Assembly, I hear the same thing is going on there. So just so we can reduce the number of people who are at the place at a particular time. Yes, we are an essential service, but we have to protect ourselves. And then as Channels Television in itself, the amount of sanitization that goes on in this office is a lot. Because we know that we are constantly in contact with people in government, we're constantly in contact with pedestrians on the street. Our job takes us to places where we could be infected. It is one of the hazards of the job, as you know. You're in a TV station right now. There's a country where it was someone who came to do a promo on the disease that ended up infecting everyone.
Yes.
So we have all those precautionary measures. For instance, today I was supposed to go live and they refused to mic me. I had to mic myself. We're constantly sanitizing every single thing around us. So yes, we're doing what we can to protect ourselves. There is, of course, as you know, a standard procedure for journalists at times like this. So we are adhering to those procedures, and hopefully we get out of this alive.
I'm smiling to myself listening to you because so many of the things you're saying apply to us here at Joy News. Now, tell me about the fake news situation. It's a big problem here in Ghana with COVID-19 running rampage. People are sharing all kinds of information. A lot of it fake, a lot of it false, a lot of it causing panic. Do you have a similar problem in Nigeria, and how is it being managed?
Well, the thing with fake news is that, every fake story that comes out basically corrects itself, right? If you give it enough time, the truth about the story will come out, right? But it's important that we take the precautionary measures at this point in time to ensure that we do not spread fake news at a time like this. It is a very crucial time for us in the country. So making sure that the right information is released and people get to know the right thing to do at the right time and know exactly what's going on. We had a fake news situation just yesterday where it was a malicious story where they said the presidency had barred some media houses from covering them, which is absolutely false. What had happened, like I said earlier, was that the number of media houses covering the presidency is a lot, and so they had to reduce that number so that social distancing can be adhered to at the presidential villa. So yes, when that story came out, of course, other mediums came out and said this is not true. This is actually what happened at that place. So the way I think to handle fake news at a time like this is to make sure that the right information is out there. If people have the true story, especially from places like the presidency and stuff like that. So if the true story about a matter is out there, then when there's a fake story, you can counter it with what the truth is. So it's important right now for government officials, for everyone who's supposed to be out there, to make sure that the right information is put out there. That way we do not have people spreading false information, mostly because most of those fake stories come from speculations and whatnot, So if the actual story is out there, then it wouldn't be possible for someone to perpetrate a fake story.
Yeah. Kayla, this is becoming a rather pleasant daily routine. Let's keep it going. Thank you very much for your time with us. Kayla Megwa, of course. Indeed, indeed. Thank you so much. Kayla Megwa is a presenter and State House correspondent for Channels Television in Abuja. She joined me there via Skype. We'll be hearing more from her, no doubt, in the coming days.